Now, you can have the best arguments, the sharpest logic, and all the data in the world. But if you can't connect with another human being, well, then you're just talking to a wall. A lot of us think influence is about being the loudest or the smartest person in the room, but really it's not. It's about something that happens beneath the surface, deep within the neural circuitry of the people that you're trying to reach. We're going to get back to basics on this episode. We're going to look at the foundation that every great leader and every trusted friend and every truly persuasive person stands on. We're talking about emotional intelligence. And I'm not just going to tell you why it matters. I'm going to walk you through 4 science-backed steps and give you practical tools that you can use starting today. And it all starts now on this episode of Engage and Inspire. Welcome back to Engage and Inspire. I am your host, Scott Liles. Now, we spend a lot of time talking about the tactics of influence. You've got things like persuasive language, your body language hacks, and maybe even the perfect call to action. And sure, these are all the flashy sports cars, but today we're talking about the engine, the thing that makes all that power actually work. We're talking about the bedrock of true influence. And that's emotional intelligence. Get this wrong, and you risk being seen as a manipulator. You get it right, and you become someone people trust, someone they follow, and someone they genuinely want to be around. So let's start by busting a myth that somehow still hangs around. That myth is that the idea to be influential, you have to be the, quote, brilliant jerk. You know the type, the boss who screams, "I'm not here to be liked, I'm here to be right." The stereotype is that their genius justifies their behavior. But here's the reality check, and I want to really dig into this because the data is overwhelming. The Center for Creative Leadership, which is a top research institution, did a major study on why executives succeed or fail. They looked at leaders across the U.S., and 6 European countries, from Fortune 500 companies to large organizations. And what did they find when they analyzed why executives crash and burn? The number one reason wasn't a lack of skill or even a low IQ. It wasn't insufficient industry knowledge. The 2 most persistent themes that were cited by over half of all the participants were poor working relationships, and the inability to adapt to change. More than half of the executives who failed did so because they couldn't work with people effectively. Researchers called this the brilliant jerk syndrome, and it crossed every culture that they studied. And this isn't old news. A 2025 study found strong links between emotional intelligence and key leadership traits like empathy and trust building. Another study from Nigeria, published a couple months ago, concluded that leaders with high emotional intelligence are simply more effective at achieving goals and building strong relationships. The evidence is consistent across decades and continents. Emotional intelligence isn't a nice to have. It's the difference between leading and derailing. So let's define what we're actually talking about. All right. Emotional intelligence isn't just, quote, being nice. Psychologist Daniel Goleman, who popularized the concept, created a framework with 4 key domains. Think of them as the 4 pillars of your influential foundation. First, you have self-awareness. This is how you understand your own emotions. You have self-management, which is how you manage your emotions effectively. You have social awareness. This is understanding others' emotions. And then you have relationship management. That's using that understanding in your interactions. Now, I'm going to give you practical science-backed steps for each one of these, and we're going to go beyond the surface level. So, first up, we have self awareness. This is the keystone. If you can't read yourself, then you can't read the room. The problem is our brains are wired to react before we think. It's called an amygdala hijack. You get a rude email and your heart rate spikes before you even finish the first sentence. Here's an immediate step that you can take. It's a technique neuroscientists call affect labeling. Now, let me explain why this works at a brain level so you can really latch onto it. In a study in 2007, researchers at UCLA used fMRI to watch what happens in the brain when people put their feelings into words. They showed participants negative emotional images. In some cases, they just looked. In other cases, they were asked to choose a word that labeled the emotion that they were feeling. The results were striking. When they labeled the emotion, the researchers saw a diminished response in the amygdala, and that's the primitive alarm system in your brain that processes fear and threat. And at the same time, they saw increased activity in the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. That's the rational regulatory part of your brain. When the prefrontal cortex lit up, the amygdala calmed down. There's a neural pathway from relation to emotion. A follow-up study in 2013 confirmed this isn't just coincidence. It's cause and effect in your neural circuitry. So here's the practical protocol. In the heat of the moment, when you feel that flush of anger or that knot of anxiety, take a deep breath and stop. Physically stop what you're doing and then verbally label that emotion. But don't just say, I'm upset. That's far too vague. Be specific. Say to yourself out loud, if you can, or in your head if you can't, I'm feeling a surge of frustration right now because this project is behind schedule. Or I'm experiencing anxiety about the conversation I have to have in 10 minutes with my manager. Or I notice that I'm feeling defensive because my idea was just criticized. So why does this work? Well, brain scans show that when you put feelings into words, you literally re-engage the logic center of your brain. You shift activity from the reactive amygdala to the thoughtful prefrontal cortex. You become the observer of your own emotions rather than being consumed by it. Now, here's the interesting twist. Research shows this reduces distress just as effectively as trying to think about something different. The fascinating part here, people don't believe it works. Even after experiencing the benefits, study participants underestimated how much it actually helped them. So you have to trust the process even when it feels like it shouldn't work. Now, I recommend practicing this daily, not just in a crisis moment. 3 times a day, just pause and label your current emotional state. I'm feeling rushed. I'm feeling content. I'm feeling bored. This builds the neural pathway so that when the big moments hit, the skill is automatic. So step 1, name it to tame it. Now, step 2 builds on that. We have self-management. If naming the emotion is awareness, then managing it is the action. And the best action you can take is often no action at all. Goleman's research shows that emotional self-control is a core competency that distinguishes outstanding performers. The higher you go, the more these skills matter. So a surgeon needs steady hands, but a leader needs a steady presence. In high-stakes negotiations, the best deal makers practice what I call strategic pausing. Goleman has written extensively about what happens in the brain during interaction. He talks about parallel circuitry. That's the fact that our brains are literally wired to connect. When you're in a tense conversation, your brain is constantly monitoring the other person's emotional state, and theirs is monitoring yours. This happens through mirror neurons. Now, this was discovered accidentally by neuroscientists in Italy, and these fire when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform the same action. As Goleman describes it, they're like a kind of neural Wi-Fi that tracks what's happening in other people, their emotions, their intentions, and it activates the same brain areas in us. Now, this happens automatically, instantaneously, and unconsciously. So when someone triggers you, your brain is already reacting before you're consciously aware of it. Your mirror neuron system is picking up on their state, and your amygdala is preparing a response. Now, here's where the strategic pause comes in. When someone says something that triggers you, maybe they criticize your work or challenge you, your instinct is to defend or attack. That's the amygdala talking. But if you respond immediately, you're responding from that reactive, primitive part of your brain. Now, here's your step. Take a deliberate, silent breath before you respond. Count to 3 in your head. Take a sip of water, sip of coffee, look down at your notes for a moment. Do something physical that interrupts the automatic pattern. This pause does 2 critical things. First, it gives your amygdala those precious seconds to calm down. The psychological arousal from the amygdala hijack takes about 90 seconds to cycle through your body. If you can wait just a few seconds, you allow your prefrontal cortex to re-engage. Second, and this is the influence part, it signals to the other person that you are composed. You're not reactive, you are in control, and people are naturally drawn to and influenced by people who seem in control. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Goleman emphasizes that the internal state of the leader affects the internal state of the people. If you're a leader, your emotional state is contagious. So through those mirror neurons, your calmness will literally become their calmness. Your reactivity will become their reactivity, so forth and so on. There's a study that drives this home. Actors played leaders in groups working on a project. When the actor was upbeat and warm, group members felt upbeat and functioned better. Now, when the leader was critical and angry, everyone else became distressed, and they performed more poorly as a team. So your strategic pause isn't just for you. It's for everyone you're leading. Now, I recommend practicing the pause in low-stakes situations first. In your next team meeting, when someone asks a question, pause for a second or two before answering. In your next conversation with your spouse, pause before responding. Build that muscle memory. Then, when the high-stake moment comes, the pause will be automatic. Now, before we dive into the deep end, I want to give a huge shout out to a company that's helped us look good while we do this hard work. If you're a leader, you know that confidence matters, and sometimes you need some armor. You need gear that says, "I've got this," before you even open your mouth. Now, that's where Pins and Aces comes in. This is a Colorado-based company, and they are doing something special in the golf and lifestyle space. Pins and Aces started with a simple mission: fill a gap in the market for expressive, high-quality gear that stands out from the crowd. And here's the part that I really love. They're committed to American-made production, manufacturing their products right here in the USA, creating jobs as they grow. And we're not just talking about hats, although they are pretty sharp. We're talking about performance polos, unique club head covers that actually make a statement, premium golf bags, custom ball markers, and the list just goes on and on. Whether you're on the course or in the clubhouse, this gear is built for the modern leader who appreciates craftsmanship. Right now, the team at Pins and Aces is offering a special deal just for my Engage and Inspire listeners. You can get 21% off your first order when you use the code HELM, that's HELM, at checkout. That's 21% off. Go to pinsandaces.com, that's PINS and aces, ACES.com, and use my code HELM, HELM, at checkout. All right, back to the science. Now we get to the part that actually feels like magic. This is social awareness, specifically empathy. Now let's be clear, empathy isn't agreeing with someone. Goleman defines empathy as awareness of the feeling, needs, and perspectives of others. It's data gathering. It's understanding their internal world without necessarily endorsing their position. Now, most people listen to respond. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. Their brains are busy formulating their next point rather than truly absorbing what the other person is saying. But if you want to influence someone, you need to understand their why. You need to know what's driving them. So here's the fascinating fact. Research on the neurobiology of trust shows a connection to the hormone oxytocin. And there's some genuinely groundbreaking recent research here on this. In October of 2025, a team of researchers published a study examining oxytocin's effect on trust. They recruited 359 individuals who were naturally skeptical, people with a low disposition to trust, and they had them participate in a trust game. Half of these participants received oxytocin, and the other half received a placebo. The results showed that oxytocin administration significantly increased trusting behavior by roughly 15 to 17%. When they pooled their data with a previous sample, bringing the total to 578 low trusting individuals, they found a 16.9% increase in trust. Now, here's why this matters. This research specifically examines administered oxytocin, but the implication is powerful. When people feel understood, when they feel safe and connected, their brains may release this bonding hormone naturally. And without trust, you have zero influence. So how do you trigger that sense of safety and trust in conversation? Well, you listen for the emotion behind the word. I call it listening to the music, not just the lyrics. If a colleague says, "I can't believe we have to redo this report again," don't just jump in with a solution. Don't say, "Well, here's how we can fix it faster." Hear the music. They're not just stating a fact. They're playing a tune of frustration or exhaustion. Your job is to reflect that music back to them. You say, "Sounds like you're feeling pretty fed up with the revisions." That's totally understandable. Boom. You just validated them. You didn't fix the problem, but you made them feel seen. And in that moment, their brain may release oxytocin. They feel safe with you. They trust you. And now they're open to your ideas. But let's go deeper. How do you actually do this consistently? Well, I recommend a practice that I call 3-level listening. Okay? So level 1, you're going to listen for facts. You're going to listen to what are they saying happened. This is where most people stop. Now, level 2 is listening for feeling. What emotion is underneath the words? Is it frustration, excitement, fear? Level 3 is listen for needs. What do they really want? What need is driving this emotion? When your colleague says, "I can't believe we have to redo this report," the fact is there is a redo. The feeling might be exhaustion. The need might be for recognition of the work already done or for more efficient process going forward. When you reflect back, you can address multiple levels. I hear that you're exhausted on the redo, and I also hear that you want your original effort to be recognized. Let's talk about how we can make sure this happens. That's deep empathy. That's the kind of listening that builds trust at a neurochemical level. Finally, relationship management. This is where we put all of this together and steer the interaction. Goleman's model identifies influence, conflict management, and teamwork as key competencies here. The biggest killer of relationships is the word but. I hear what you're saying, but we have to do it my way. That but erases everything you said before it. It tells the other person that your acknowledgement was just set up for dismissal. So here's your steps. Replace the but with and. So this is the and staircase. So instead of, I understand you're stressed, but the deadline is firm. Try, I understand you're stressed and we need to hit this deadline. How can we make that easier for you? You see the difference? But is a wall. It creates opposition. And is a bridge. It acknowledges their reality and adds your own. It invites collaboration instead of conflict. But let's go deeper into why this works. The and statement does something psychologically profound. It validates the other person's reality while also asserting your own. It signals their concerns and your concerns can coexist. You're not asking them to abandon their position, you're inviting them to hold both perspectives simultaneously and find a path forward. So I recommend practicing the and staircase in 3 steps. So step 1 is going to be acknowledge fully. Before you add your and, make sure you truly acknowledge their position. Not just the words, but the emotions and the need. I hear your frustration about the deadline, and I know you're worried about quality. Step 2, add your reality with and. State your need, your constraint, or your perspective. And we have a contractual obligation to deliver by Friday. Now, step 3 is invite that collaboration. Turn it into a joint problem. How can we ensure quality while still meeting that Friday deadline? What would make that work for you? This 3-step pattern turns conflict into co-creation. It's not manipulation, it's genuine collaboration. You're not trying to win, you're trying to solve. Now, let me give you another example. Let's say in a performance review, instead of saying, you've been missing deadlines, but I know you've been working hard. Try, I know you've been working incredibly hard and we've had some missed deadlines. Let's figure out together what's getting in the way and how I can support you. The difference is profound. The first version sounds like faint praise with a criticism tacked on the end. The second version sounds like a partnership. So, we've covered the 4 pillars with deep dives into the research. We've talked about self-awareness, which is the name it to tame it, self-management, this is that strategic pause, empathy, which is your deep listening that triggers the oxytocin release and builds trust, and then relationship management, the and staircase that turns conflict into collaboration. But here's the key insight that ties this all together. These aren't 4 separate skills. They're a cascade. You can't manage emotions you haven't recognized. You can't empathize with others if you're drowning in your own reactivity. You can't manage relationships effectively if you haven't built trust through empathy. The research shows that the most persistent reason executives fail is poor working relationships. This isn't a technical problem, it is a human problem, and it's solvable. Recent studies confirm that leaders with higher emotional intelligence are perceived as more empathetic, ethical, and capable of fostering trust and inspiring commitment. These aren't soft skills, people. They're the hard skills of human interaction. And the Nigerian study from this year concluded that emotional intelligence training is no longer a luxury, but a necessity for organizations seeking to remain competitive. That's a strong statement, and it's backed by decades of research. So there you have it. The bedrock of influence isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the most aware. It's about building the skills that allow you to connect with people at a fundamental level. To recap your actionable science-backed steps to build your emotional intelligence, you have self-awareness, which is the name it to tame it. Self-management, it's where you take that pause. Empathy is where you're going to listen for the emotions. And relationship management, which is the and staircase. Emotional intelligence is the bedrock. It's the foundation that makes every other influence tactic possible. Build it strong. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you found any of the information in this episode insightful or useful, please don't hesitate to send me an email at scott@leadwithhelm.com. Leave a review, like, share, comment, subscribe to our podcast, share it with a friend, a colleague, or anybody that you think would benefit from the lesson that's in this podcast. Stick around. Our next episode is going to be pretty interesting. And I'm sorry for the delay between episodes. It's been pretty hectic around Helm Leadership Group, but I'm getting back to it, and I'm getting back to you, my listeners. Thank you, and remember, until next time, keep engaging and keep inspiring. Take care.